Longhorn Nation, is Arch Manning partly responsible for Quinn Ewers' development this offseason?
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by HelloFresh. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it is America's #1 meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/college60 and use code college60 for 60% off plus free shipping. And on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we're discussing the spring practice and the scrimmage from Thursday and Friday of last week. Then we're talking about the Texas basketball team. Rodney Terry is adding one assistant to the staff while losing another. And last but not least, the Texas baseball team, in the midst of 5 games in 5 days, has started off 2-1, winning the weekend series against Kansas State. They now have 2 straight games against Texas State. We discuss all of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And let's start with the spring practice notes. And kind of reactions / updates from what took place last week. To my knowledge, there was a spring practice on Thursday and then a scrimmage on Friday. And so we're going to react to both of those practices right now on Locked On Longhorns. And let's start with our quarterback one, our signal caller, Quinn Ewers. And everything we've heard is that they have seen development on and off the field, right? On the field, he's making the right reads. The ball is coming out, quicker and tighter. His mechanics look better than they did last year. His mechanics look more consistent than they did last year. And he's more accurate with the ball, right? He has better timing with his receivers when you talk about off the field, right? He just has a better urgency, right? He looks more serious, right? Since he cut the mullet, he's more vocal, right? In terms of practices, being a leader, right? Helping some of the young players, not just the young quarterbacks in the room and Arch Manning and Maalik, but also the young players on the offense, the true freshmen that are really trying to get acclimated to the University of Texas and college football. So all signs point to Quinn Ewers being a lot better than he was last year because he's taken that next step in terms of development on and off the field. But one thing I mentioned early in spring practices on this podcast was that Arch Manning would be good for Quinn Ewers in the sense that iron sharpens iron. And I thought that he would take pressure off of Quinn Ewers because we saw last year when Quinn came in, the media storm kind of circulated Quinn. It was all about Quinn, the super talented player coming out of high school that took $1 million in NIL to go to Ohio State and it didn't work out, right? Everybody had something to say about Quinn, good or bad, right? Now that media attention and casual fan attention has shifted to Arch Manning, to the point to where Quinn Ewers is kind of flying under the radar if you're not a Texas fan or somebody that keeps up with the program, right? Everybody wants to hear about Arch Manning. So in a sense, that takes pressure off of Quinn Ewers and allows him to just focus on football. But I also said when you have another #1 overall prospect in his class, the, I guess, third or tied for first highest rated quarterback of all time, according to 24/7 Sports Composite, coming into the University of Texas, especially coming off the year that Quinn Ewers had last year, that's going to put some pressure on him. And Inside Texas has reported that that seems to be the case. JT Sanders, not sure if he should have said it, but he came out in his media availability and said that the presence of Arch Manning has definitely lit a fire under Quinn Ewers. And that's something that I thought would happen all along, right? We know Arch Manning's pedigree coming from the Manning family. We know he's really talented, and we know he's going to come in and work his ass off. He's competitive, right? He probably knows he won't be quarterback 1 this year, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to put his best foot forward to try to at least work his way up to quarterback 2 and make, the staff think, really highly of him in the sense of when he is our quarterback 1, we're confident he's going to be ready to go. So, I think that Arch Manning being in the building has done a lot for the development of Quinn Ewers because he's looking over his shoulder and sees this young prodigy that is the future, hopefully, of Texas football if you got what you were expecting to get out of Isidore Newman. And one thing I thought that was interesting is they said that Quinn Ewers is just focused on being the best quarterback he can be for Texas football this year. He's not approaching this year as if he has to leave to go to the draft after this year. And we knew that the perfect, setup kind of would be Quinn Ewers starting for 2 years and then Maalik or Arch taking over that role. But now if there's rumblings about Quinn Ewers staying in college for another year, that could lead to a lot of confusion at the end of the season, because we know that Arch was cool with redshirting and sitting back for 1 year. I'm not sure about 2. And if Quinn Ewers tries to make the decision to come back to the University of Texas next year, it's going to be a lot of questions that need to be answered by the staff in the offseason. Let's move on to the offensive line, which looked really steady until last week. There were a few times where they were rotating players in and out, but for the most part, that first team has stayed steady with Kelvin Banks, Hayden Connor, Jake Majors, DJ Campbell, and Christian Jones at right tackle based on injuries, just youth, players on the first team playing well, et cetera, et cetera. But last week in spring practices and the scrimmage, we saw a little mix-up in terms of Cam Williams getting a lot of time, significant reps is what it was described as, at right guard instead of DJ Campbell. And the reports are saying that the Texas staff is just waiting on DJ Campbell to just take that position by the horns, grab it, right? But right now there's a legitimate competition between Cam Williams and DJ Campbell for that right guard position, because DJ Campbell, up until this point, has not been able to put a stranglehold on that position. And DJ Campbell is kind of like a funny case study in stars matter, but they don't matter, because he was ranked higher than Kelvin Banks coming out of high school. And Kelvin Banks already looks like a superstar, while DJ Campbell is kind of fighting for that right guard spot with Cam Williams. But I also think because DJ Campbell was a 5-star and one of the highest rated linemen coming out of high school, they want DJ Campbell to take that job. He just hasn't taken it over yet. In terms of Cole Hudson and Connor Robinson, right now they're seen as the backups to Jake Majors at the center position. I think the Texas staff wants a healthy competition there, but for a healthy competition to take place, Connor Robinson and Cole Hudson have to be healthy to compete with Jake Majors, who's just kind of winning with availability right now at that center position. But I think when Cole Hudson and Connor Robinson gets healthy, you're going to see more competition at the guard positions, left and right. And then in terms of the left guard position, Hayden Connor moved. I think he was working with center with the second team. And so that made way for Big Nito to get some reps at left guard. So even though I think right now, if you had to ask the staff who the first team offensive line would be, I think it would still be Banks, Connor, Majors, DJ Campbell, and Christian Jones at right tackle. I think Cam Williams is making a lot of noise at right guard. I think Big Nito is making a lot of noise at left guard. And I think when Connor Robinson and Cole Hudson get back, there's going to be a lot of competition going into the season in that interior offensive line. So good to see some movement there, right? Iron sharpens iron. You got to figure out who the best 5 are going into that Rice game in September. And then at the edge position, we've talked a lot on the podcast about Ethan Burke and Justice Finkley. And I said kind of both players unfairly were put into boxes, right? Ethan Burke was the long, kind of rangy, twitchy, pass rusher that had a lot of skills in that position, but maybe wasn't the best at stopping the run. And you had Justice Finkley, who has a high motor, really quick twitch, right? Can, really fill up gaps with his strength and get to the, ball carrier. But people were saying, well, he doesn't have the long enough arms to consistently rush the passer. Like I said, it wasn't fair to either one of those players to put them in those boxes, because I think both of those players, Ethan Burke can be stout against the run, and I think Justice Finkley can get to the quarterback. We saw it in the Oklahoma game. But the reports are showing that Ethan Burke has really come on this offseason, and as of right now, he looks like your starter at that edge position opposite of Barron Sorrell. But like I said, Bo Davis has said on multiple occasions that we don't have starters on this defensive line. And what's good for the Longhorns and what's really good for us as fans is there is just such a talented rotation of players inside and out that regardless of who gets the first snap on game days, there's going to be a lot of really good defensive players rotating in and out for our Longhorns. When you talk about the scrimmage specifically on Friday, most of it was 1s versus 2s, and Inside Texas reported that basically whoever was the first team was dominating. When the first team offense went against the second team defense, the first team offense really won that matchup. And some players that were mentioned specifically were the running backs. That continues to be a theme. Cedric Baxter, Jaden Blue, and Savion Red all stood out in conjunction with the first team offensive line. And then when the first team defense went against the second team offense and Maalik Murphy, maybe Arch got sprinkled into that as well. The first team defense, as we've seen for the last couple of weeks, won that matchup. And some of the players on the defensive side that stood out were Austin Jordan, Terrence Brooks, and Ant Hill. I think Austin Jordan had an interception. Terrence Brooks had a forced fumble, and Anthony Hill was just all over the place, right? And we've seen that with him since Denton Ryan. And then Chip Brown asked 4 players on this Texas football team, I think this was in the media availability, who they expected to have a really big season this year, right? Because he said the players know, all right, we're going to hear from, these reports and sources and different things, but the players know who's been balling in spring practice and who should ball during the season. And so they asked Jaron Thompson, who he expected to have a really big year this year, and he said Maalik Muhammad and Anthony Hill, right? 2 freshmen. Maalik Muhammad, just a really mature football player, a corner, somebody that can play in zone and man and can come in and run support. And they said he's just a sponge, really soaking up knowledge, really trying to learn the game, but he doesn't feel like somebody that just got out of high school and has been on campus for 3 months, right? He approaches the game like a veteran. We've heard that from multiple of these true freshmen in that 2023 class led by Arch Manning. And then Anthony Hill, right? We just talked about him being a standout in the scrimmage. I mean, his size and speed combination, I mean, somebody that can squat 550 pounds and also was in the 4x100 relay. You know what I'm saying? He played running back. He played linebacker. So he's super athletic, 6'3", 230 already in terms of size, and somebody that when you put him on the field, he's just going to make plays. And I expect him to do a lot of that this year. They asked Jahdae Barron. He said Keaton Crawford. We know about his speed, but he said he's really been coming downhill and thumping in spring practices. And also his communication has been really good in place of Jalen Catalon and then Jaden Blue. We've just heard about how all the running backs have been really good in spring practice, but I think Jaden Blue kind of represents something that the other running backs don't on a play-to-play basis, and that's just that explosiveness and that home run hitting ability. I think anytime you put the ball in Jaden Blue's hands, he's a threat to hit his head on the goalpost. And then JT Sanders, he talked about the true freshmen and Cedric Baxter, Jonte Cook, and Anthony Hill. We've already talked about them ad nauseum, how they've come in right away and looked like veterans. But he also mentioned that Barron Sorrell is super strong. He doesn't like going against Barron Sorrell. He expects him to have a good year. And then Ethan Burke has been a standout in spring practices. That's per JT Sanders. And then when they asked Jordan Whittington, of course, he's going to go with the veterans, right? Jonathan Brooks. We know that Steve Sarkisian, every year he has manned the offense. He's had an 1,000-yard rusher. I expect Jonathan Brooks to be running back 1 and get his first 1,000-yard season rushing this year. So Jordan Whittington, if Jonathan Brooks is healthy, he would not be lying about that one. And then Byron Murphy next to Tavondre Sweat. I was expecting him to have a really big breakout year last year. Now with the losses of Moro Ojimo and Keandre Coburn, I think you'll really see that come to fruition with Alfred Collins kind of comfortably in that rotation behind them. So a lot of good things coming out of spring practices and the scrimmage for the Texas Longhorns. And 2 things continue to jump off the screen for me with this Texas football team: the level of talent they have and the depth they have behind it. A quick word from FanDuel, and then we're going to get into the Texas basketball team and Rodney Terry bringing in staff members and also losing staff members at the same time. Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you do not win. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. So we've talked about this kind of transition period after the season for Rodney Terry, where you're figuring out who's going to be on your staff next year, right? Who's going to be coming in, if anybody's going to be leaving. You're trying to re-recruit your roster right now with the players that still have eligibility, seeing who is going to come back and who's going to move on, whether that be to the transfer portal. We saw Rowan Brumbaugh enter the transfer portal. Best of luck to him if he does not return to Texas, or if they're going on to the NBA draft or just wherever, right? And then you're recruiting the players that you're bringing in terms of the transfer portal. I think your recruiting class is locked in with Ron Holland and AJ Johnson. And I've talked about how we've seen Rodney Terry on the recruiting trail in Dallas, in California, and then most recently he was in Florida at Montverde, where Dylan Mitchell came from and won a state championship last year. I saw him recruiting a few 5-star players at Montverde over the last few weeks. In addition to his press conference, donor events, Rodney Terry's just been everywhere, right? And there has been some movement on his staff, right? He has brought in Frank Haith. I'm not sure how to say it, as an assistant, and he has lost John Reilly, the strength and conditioning coach. So let's start with Frank Haith. And I think the biggest thing that I love about this move is the fact that he's familiar with the University of Texas, right? He coached for 3 years under Rick Barnes alongside Rodney Terry at the University of Texas. So when Chris Beard and Rodney Terry and the staff talked about uniting the family, this is right, like the epitome of that, bringing somebody back who used to coach at the University of Texas to come back and coach at the 40 Acres once again. And he was there from 2002 to 2004. So he was on the staff when this Texas team went to the Final Four. I think this is a huge pickup for Rodney Terry. I would expect that he probably would be the special assistant to the head coach or assistant head coach, right? Coming from being an assistant under Penny Hardaway at Memphis. That was his last stop. So for him to come back to the University of Texas as an assistant, I think he would probably get an increase in job title in terms of associate head coach. I said special assistant to the head coach earlier. I didn't mean that. Associate head coach, the position that Rodney Terry had before he took over as interim under Chris Beard. And in addition to serving at the 40 Acres for 3 years under Rick Barnes, he also coached as a full-time head coach. He coached the University of Miami, the University of Missouri, and Tulsa University from 2004 to 2022. So not only does he have a plethora of years of assistant head coaching experience, right, at the University of Texas, and I think 4 years at Texas A&M. So he knows how to recruit in the state of Texas, but he's been a head coach for 18 years, winning 59% of his games, right? I know that's still not great, but y'all spent 3 months, not y'all, right? But a lot of people spent 3 months talking about Rodney Terry's 53%, winning percentage as a head coach. So at least my boy Frank Haith got 59%. That's some really good programs, Miami, Missouri, and Tulsa. And then, like I said, he spent last season as an assistant to Penny Hardaway at Memphis. And I searched his name on Twitter to see what Memphis fans, thought about the loss, because sometimes you'll get on there and they'll say, oh, we didn't need him. He didn't do anything anyway. Or sometimes they'll say it was a big loss. And that was the gist that I got. A lot of people said that he was a big loss and he brought a lot to the University of Memphis in terms of recruiting and X's and O's. And I expect him to bring that to the University of Texas. Like I said, he was on this staff when they went to the Final Four. He was a part of the staff that recruited Boobie Gibson and LaMarcus Aldridge to the University of Texas. And everything I've seen on the internet says that he's a really good coach, really good with recruiting, really good with X's and O's. And like I said, I expect him to probably be the associate head coach under Rodney Terry and his return to the 40 Acres. Now we are losing John Reilly, strength and conditioning coach. Everything I've heard about him is he's one of the best in the business. He was at Texas Tech for the 5 years with Chris Beard and then the 2 years here before everything happened this year. Like I said, just well-renowned, one of the best in the business. And I thought this year, outside of the 3-game stretch where Timmy Allen didn't play but probably could have played in the Big 12 tournament championship, and then Dylan Dessou at the end, I thought the team was relatively healthy this year. So all the credit in the world goes to John Reilly, the strength and conditioning coach. Hate to lose him, because he's definitely one of the best in the business. But, I wish him best of luck at his next stop. I'm not sure if that would be Ole Miss. That would make sense since he came from Texas Tech with Chris Beard to the University of Texas. But wherever he goes, I wish him the best. And, Rodney Terry is going to have to do his due diligence to make sure he brings in a really good strength and conditioning coach to replace John Reilly. And then we talk about this baseball team really quickly. I said before they started the 5-game stretch, they would go 4-1. They would go 2-1 against Kansas State and then beat Texas State twice. Now that still holds true, right? They can still beat Texas State twice to go 4-1 because they went 2-1 against Kansas State. But I hate to be right like that, especially because in the game they lost, they blew a lead, right? So I would have rather them sweep Kansas State and I'd be wrong than me be right and lose the way that they lost to Kansas State on Saturday. But now Texas sits at 23-10 on the season. I expect them to be 25-10 after 2 games against Texas State. On Friday, they won the game 6-5. They scored 5 runs in the 8th. They were trailing 6-0. No, they were trailing 5-1. Excuse me. They were trailing 5-1, and they scored 5 runs in the 8th to shock Kansas State. Those 5 runs came off a bunt single, 3 doubles, a triple, and a sac fly, all in the 8th inning. So shout out to the Longhorns getting a come from behind win on Friday. On Saturday, the score was the same, but they lost 5-6 instead of winning 6-5. Texas had a 5-3 lead going into the 7th inning when LBJ gave up 3 runs to tilt the score. So that made for a rubber match on Sunday, and the Longhorns left no doubt winning against Kansas State 8-2. They had 7 extra base hits in this game. I think 5 doubles and 2 home runs out of 12 hits total, 7 extra base hits out of 12 hits total. They were eating their Wheaties on Sunday morning for sure. And y'all know I love when that bullpen comes in and shuts out opponents, and they did just that on Sunday. 4 shutout innings to close the game and clinch the series against Kansas State. And like I said, if my prediction holds true, they will win tonight and tomorrow night against Texas State to end up at 25-10. Not end up, but be 25-10 on the season heading into their next series. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hook 'em and peace.